everyone, it's Ozzy from OzTalksHW, and today I have an interesting video for you guys. You guys already saw the title, so you kind of have a premise of what's going on here, but I have two computers that my friend found from a trash dump about 5 months ago. He was taking out his trash as one normally does, and he saw two computers sitting next to his communal trash dumpster. His first inclination, he hit me up, which I actually really appreciated. Do you say anything? Are you going to say anything?
Me?
Yeah.
Well, I've had these desktops for like 5 months?
It's been a minute. Since summer. Definitely since summer.
It's been a while.
He basically asked me if I wanted the computers for free because he's not going to use them, and you know me, I'm not going to turn down free hardware. So I said yes, and about 2 weeks ago I finally had time to go pick up the computers. Now these are pretty old machines. They're about 8 to 10 years old, and they're housing an Athlon 2X2 dual core and a Core 2 Duo machine. And that gave me a little bit of an idea of what I will be working with and exactly what kind of projects I can use these computers for. This one looks kind of powerful. Oh, no, it's not.
No?
Yeah, I see the sticker
Core
right
2?
there. Core 2 Duo. After picking these up, the big question was, what will I do with these two computers? I initially talked to my editor, and we thought a 24-hour gaming PC challenge would be pretty cool. Think Linus's Scrapyard Wars, but just with one person and a little bit cheaper. And I liked that idea, but as I got the computers and I noticed exactly what I was working with, I decided to scrap that. So I hit up my patrons, and they mentioned that while a 24-hour time limit isn't necessary, maybe upgrading the machines and then giving them away is a good option. And I'm going to do that, but not in this video. So my fraternity has this really cool jukebox that we use for music at parties or any kind of get-together. And honestly, it's probably one of the best parts of the common space that we have. And even though it's not the most practical way to play music, I think the novelty trumps the inconvenience. And no other place on campus or fraternity really has something like this. So I want to make sure that it works properly. Unfortunately, it's been broken for a few weeks now, and we've retreated to using an aux cord, which isn't awful, but the issue is that a lot of my brothers don't have headphone jacks on their phones. They're either iPhone or they're using some Android that just doesn't support that. And so we're kind of limited to who can play music. And if you are playing music, you can't really use your phone unless you're by the jukebox the entire night. So I'm hoping that these two computers resolve that issue. These two computers are completely functional, which is awesome. That means I don't have to do any kind of troubleshooting, thank God. The only problem is that they don't have storage devices. That's not a big issue because those are pretty cheap to pick up. And because I'm using this computer for this specific project of playing Spotify, essentially whenever, I don't need a large storage device. So a $20 120 gigabyte SSD that I can pick up from Micro Center works perfectly fine. What I didn't expect were the specifications of these computers. They both have 4 gigs of RAM and dual core chips, and although they are older generation computers, and that doesn't sound super enticing or exciting, for a completely free PC, I mean, these were considered trash when they are 100% salvageable. That's pretty good. The only issue is that they are pretty close to their maximum performance already. You can only go up to a faster Core 2 Duo on the Intel machine, and on the AMD machine, you can only upgrade to 95-watt quad-core AMD chips on the AM2 Plus or on the AM3 platform. On top of that, the RAM is maxed out, which is kind of whack because you can clearly see the DIMM slots that HP removed from the motherboard. There was a potential for 8 gigs of RAM, but they took that away, so that's kind of annoying. Albeit, here's my plan for these two machines. The Core 2 Duo computer is going to be used in my fraternity's jukebox. We're only playing Spotify, so once I pop an SSD in there, it's going to be perfectly fine for what I need it to do. Now the AMD machine, I eventually want to turn it into a light gaming rig, and for me to do that, I would like to fit larger video cards, so I'm going to transplant the AMD machine from the slimline case into the micro ATX case that the Core 2 Duo machine is currently held in. And then I'm going to switch out the Core 2 Duo machine and put that in the slimline case. That's going to be perfectly fine for the jukebox. After that, I'm going to customize both a little bit so they're a little less unappealing, and then I'm going to install them into their respective locations. So first things first, let's do the transplant. Now, both of these computers are manufactured by HP, and both of them have micro ATX motherboards, so theoretically, this should work. Let's find out. Transplanting the components to the new computer was simple and straightforward. A good amount of time went into planning and ensuring compatibility. For instance, I measured the CPU coolers for good measure. I didn't want to uninstall something just to have it not fit in its new case. Once I made sure of that, the rest was simple. I unplugged the power supply connectors and SATA connectors from the main board and uninstalled the slimline power supply in the small form factor case. Afterwards, I unscrewed the main board and set that aside. Removing the I/O shield was easily the hardest part of this entire process, but luckily it only took a few extra minutes. I repeated the process with the large case holding the Intel machine. I'd just like to shout out HP for reducing the number of proprietary hardware used in their office computers. I mean, like seriously, it simplified the process tremendously. They'll get my recommendation in the future. Here's the Intel Core 2 Duo platform in all of its glory. It doesn't look very nice, and I doubt it's been cleaned within the last decade. It's even worse under the hood. Yeah, gross. I got some paper towels and my roommate's hairdryer and got to work. It didn't take too long, and only a few minutes of work made it presentable. I applied new thermal paste and the platform looks great. I installed the I/O shield and the motherboard in its new case. Now the ghetto rigging part. The slimline case came with a fan, but the mounting system is kind of whack, so I made my own. I used sticky tack or putty to hold the fan to the top of one of the vents. It's not ideal, but hey, it works. I'd rather have a ghetto rig solution with moving air than no solution at all. The 120GB inland SSD I bought for 20 bucks at Micro Center has no mounting solution in the slimline case. So how do I fix it? Sticky tack. When in doubt, sticky tack it, fellas. It works wonders. I reinstalled the power supply after a quick dusting and plugged everything in. Moment of truth. Let's power it on. It booted just fine, but it was met with a disk error. I suspect that it couldn't read Windows 10 properly because the current drivers were too far ahead from the Core 2 Duo's era, and Windows couldn't roll back, and thus it just couldn't boot. After reinstalling Windows 10, it fixed the problem easily. Finding the drivers was also simple because HP lists actual product specifications on their site. Plenty other companies simplify the specs, understandably, but that's just so annoying. I'm not calling out any specific company, but if the shoe fits, Dell. It's really just Dell. The system uses an integrated NVIDIA 7100 plus N4 630i Wombo combo as the GPU. That's decade-old tech. Needless to say, gaming won't be an option here unless you enjoy jagged edges and mediocre slideshows for your FPS. So I couldn't do much about the boring case design. I really wanted to add RGB lights, but I couldn't because of Molex compatibility. I was considering spray painting the outside, but I didn't want to limit the airflow, and the paint could definitely do that. So instead, I did what I could internally with the operating system. Graphic design is my passion.
2 hours later.
I think it's done. I'm sure the 25 minutes that went into this custom background won't go unnoticed, and that's my chapter president on the wall. He's a pretty cool guy. Besides that, I installed Spotify on this computer, and it's much faster than the previous computer, which I'm kind of scared to open up, by the way, because I don't understand how a computer can be so slow in this day and age that it can't run Spotify properly. But needless to say, I don't think we can really flex on anyone with this computer, neither performance nor design. It's not really a looker, and it's not really a shower either, but once we install it into the Jukebox, I think it's gonna look pretty cool, so let's go do that. Safety first. The Jukebox itself is pretty jank, but the novelty of it is cool. One thing that I noticed while I was replacing the computer is that it's kind of gross. We should probably clean this at some point. But if you turn the Jukebox around, you are greeted with a CRT monitor on the top, which is the display, and then a super old computer at the bottom. And I'm guaranteeing that this computer is probably older than the average age of my viewers of this channel. It's like straight out of super early 2000s or the late 90s at the very least. After seeing this computer, I am extremely glad that I decided to go this route with the dumpster PC because it was definitely needed. So we got to work. Switching out the computers was a very simple task. It was just a little bit cumbersome moving everything out of the chassis. The only problem that we ran into was powering the microcontroller board that controls the two buttons on the front and then also the little mouse pad rolling bally thingy that you see, the little red ball on top of the Jukebox. Weirdly enough, that's actually powered by a Molex pin, and the power supply that the Slimline desktop uses doesn't have any Molex adapters. A blessing and a curse in this instance, the one time that we actually need a Molex adapter, it's not there. So what I did was I ordered an adapter. I noticed that the Slimline desktop actually had a free SATA port, so I got a SATA to Molex adapter, plugged that in, and it worked just fine. And this computer is so much faster than the one that we had previously. I wish I could capture just how slow the old Jukebox was. And it's not like we're going to use it all the time. We're not going to really play any games on it. It's just good to have, good to play music at parties or at any other events where there are going to be a lot of people in the common space. Now the total for this computer, excluding of course the free part of it, all of the upgrades, was about $30. It was $20 for the 120 gigabyte SSD, and honestly, I could have gotten away with a 32 gigabyte one or a 60 gigabyte one for about half the price if I wanted to. And then it was about $5 for the SATA to Molex adapter, and then about another $5 for the Wi-Fi adapter. So you're looking at around $30 to get this thing up and running, which I think is a good investment. I think it's a long-term one, and it increases the novelty of what our chapter offers. You guys might be wondering, what am I going to use the old computer that was in the Jukebox prior to the upgrade for? Absolutely nothing. I mean, maybe in the future, if I have a project that I could use it for, perhaps maybe the case for a sleeper build, that would be pretty cool. But the components are just so old and it's in such bad condition that I don't really want to go through the task of cleaning it up, upgrading it, all of that stuff. But a sleeper build would actually be kind of sweet. I actually think I might do that, so. I guess I kind of lied in the beginning, not absolutely nothing. Sleeper computer would be cool, so maybe be on the lookout for that, I don't know. I could also donate the computer parts to Phil's computer lab. I'm sure he'll get a kick out of all of those floppy disks. And probably Pentium 2s. Yeah, maybe I'll do that. But anyway, if you guys enjoyed this video, then leave a like. If you loved it, share and subscribe and all of that wonderful stuff. I'm glad that I was able to finally get this video up and running. Like I mentioned before, I had another idea for this computer, but I completely scrapped it. So that put me behind schedule about a week to a week and a half because I was already like halfway done with that video. But besides that, make sure you guys follow me on all social media. If you loved it, then check out my Patreon. I always have cool perks on there and all of that money goes back into the channel to support the cause. Besides that, have a wonderful rest of your weekend and I'll see you guys later. Peace.
Oh, look at my African American over here. Look at him. Are you the greatest?